Today on Ask Money Talk, we answer a question we're hearing about trusts. Georgia Swan, tax and estate planner, TD Wealth, joins us now. Here's the question for you. Someone's asking, is it true I could be part of a trust and not realize it? And what qualifies as a trust?
So people would be surprised that sometimes the most simple arrangements actually create a legal trust. So for example, let's say a grandparent opens a bank account and they say, I'm holding this account for my grandkids. That is actually a trust. So we have to start with the understanding that a trust is a relationship. So let's look at ownership for a second. A lot of people don't realize that simplistically, there's actually two parts of owning an asset. There's what's called legal title and beneficial title. Now, for most of us, we don't realize that there's a difference between those two elements because for most of the assets that we own both elements of that. So if I own a piece of real estate and it's registered in my name, ergo I have legal title, that means that I can mortgage it, I can decide to sell it, and if I do decide to sell it, I'm the one that decides what I'm selling it for, helps negotiate the price, and then when the time comes to actually transfer it to the person that's buying it from me, I have the right and the only authority to sign the documents that evidences that transfer. The beneficial ownership means that if I get $100,000 for that property, if I'm also the beneficial owner, I get to keep it. Now, simplistically, what a trust does is actually separates those two elements of ownership. It puts the legal title in the hands of the trustees, and the person who actually transfers that asset to those trustees is referred to as the settlor, and those trustees hold and control that asset, whether it's real estate or an investment account or something else, for the benefit of somebody else, and they're called the beneficiaries. Now, the beneficiaries can be individual people, they can be corporations, and in certain very, very narrow circumstances, they can be a charity, but we're not going to talk about those kinds of trusts. They're quite complicated. So you may have created this relationship without even really knowing it.
Let's talk about some of the situations where someone may have created this relationship that didn't even realize they created it.
Yeah, so oftentimes there's a misconception that a trust has to be created by this big, complicated document that basically outlines the obligations and the powers and who the people involved are. And those documents often go by the word trust deed or trust agreement. There's different names for them. But in actual fact, in law, a trust is a relationship that can arise because of the actions of the people involved. So as I said, let's say a parent would like their child to be able to help them with their banking, and they walk into a financial institution and add the child onto their bank account. But both the parent and child always treat that bank account as belonging to the parent. And the child can't access the account per se on their own accord, but only with the instruction of the parent. That's a trust. And a lot of times those kinds of things are referred to as informal trusts, but there's really no such thing in law as an informal or a formal trust. Something either is a trust or it's not a trust. And as I said, the actions of the parties, the facts around the situation can create this trust relationship. So there's other easy examples, and sometimes it's even in the name. So we have grandparents, for example, that open an in-trust account, it's called, for the children, for grandchildren. But a lot of times they don't realize that that is a trust, even though it's in the name, because the way they operate, especially when the children are still minors, makes the grandparent feel that it's actually my money. But it isn't, and there's all sorts of rules around them. Now, the idea of these trust relationships that don't have this big document with all the rules attached to it is that basically, even though they are certainly trusts, the rules are just what statute law would say, or maybe common law. So the people have to operate within certain parameters as well that they may not realize. So one of the issues is you may have somewhat casually created this trust relationship, not knowing, And now there are some new trust reporting rules that the CRA requires these relationships, which are considered taxpayers under the income tax legislation, to now file tax returns. So you may not even be aware of the fact that you now may have a tax filing obligation because of these relationships. So it's really important, if any of this sounds familiar, that you make sure you get proper legal and tax advice.
Georgia, always very important topic. Always great to get your insights.
Thank you.
That was Georgia Swan, Tax and Estate Planner, TD Wealth. And if you have a question, send it to moneytalk@td.com.